Habakkuk is a book where a man is talking to God. It's a man is talking to God, God talks back, the man talks again, and it's a communication between a man and God. And so Habakkuk is a prophet, but rather than what we're normally used to where a prophet is speaking to people, this is a prophet speaking to God. And so there's a lot to learn from the book. We don't know much about Habakkuk himself, but all we know is he says his name is Habakkuk and he's a prophet. He doesn't tell us who his dad is, his mom is, we don't know none of that, which is interesting. It doesn't really matter that we don't know that. What I would like to know, if he would have been here to tell us, is his age, because his age would allow us to kind of know how far to go back in the history, in the background, you know. But that's okay. We can assume, I can assume that he's middle-aged because of what he writes. Anyway, let me just pray for myself before we go and we start. Father God, we have no right to even mention your name if it wasn't for your Son, Jesus Christ, and the blood that he shed for us. And so we ask you, Father God, in his name, to talk to us today, to minister to us today, to meet us today, Father, like you have promised, to teach us the truth through your Holy Spirit, Father, like you have promised. May your name be glorified today in Jesus' name. So yes, Habakkuk, let's say he's 50. What I'm going to do today, we're only going to cover verse 1 to verse 4. Verse 1 to verse 4 is all we're going to cover today of chapter 1. And assuming that Habakkuk is around 50, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just give you a snapshot of the background of, you know, the times he's living in, right? I'm going to give you the century he's living in, so that you can, when we come to read what he's saying, we can, you know, we can see where his heart is at. So the three questions we're going to be asking ourselves are these. What did his world look like? And that's why we're going to look at the century before, or the century he's living in. So that's the first question. What did the world he's living in look like? And how does that compare with the world that we're living in today? The second question is, what did he do about it? And obviously, what do we do about it, about our world we're living in today? And the last question is, you know, if we agree that what he did about it is what we should be doing, how should it be done? Okay? So the first question, what did his world look like? Yes? Now, I'm not going to go into it, but if you want to read the history, you want to look at 2 Chronicles chapter 33 to 36. 3 chapters. 2 Chronicles chapter 33 to chapter 36 will give you a 100-year history of that time that he's living in, and he could have been born anywhere there. Okay? So that's the time he's talking about. But a brief summary would look like this. This is what is contained in those 100 years. You've got idol worship. And not just any normal idol worship. God told Solomon that I have chosen Jerusalem, out of all the tribes of Israel, I've chosen Jerusalem to put my house in Jerusalem where I will meet with you. The temple in Jerusalem is God's house. And God says, this is where I will meet with you as my people. If you were living in the day of Habakkuk, when you went into the temple, you find 2 altars there to false gods, to Baal and Ashereth, in the temple of God. Now, I shudder to even think what was being sacrificed on those altars. Another thing you find when you walk around Jerusalem in this time is fortune tellers, people who deal with in omens. You'll find sorcery, mediums and necromancers. Necromancers are people who consult the dead. All of this is being practiced openly. You'll also find burning of children to false gods, sacrificing kids to false gods. All of this is happening in those days. In the book of Psalms, Psalm 106, we find a few verses that give us a snapshot. So I would really advise that you read 2 Chronicles 33 to 36, but for today's purposes, let me just read for us Psalm 106, 34 to 39, which is like just a snapshot. And this is what it says. They did not destroy the peoples as the Lord had commanded them, but they mixed with the nations and learned to do as they did. They served their idols which became a snare to them. They sacrificed their sons and their daughters to the demons. They poured out innocent blood, the blood of their sons and daughters, whom they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan, and the land was polluted with blood. Thus they became unclean by their acts and played the whore in their deeds. That's what the word looks like for Habakkuk. But now when we look at his prayer, we can see the things that he's actually complaining about. The things, because it's a prayer, it's a prayer of complaint, and he complains about specific things, so let's just look at them. He says, verse 2, he says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save?" That's the first thing, violence. He says, the city is filled with violence. And this is not just any type of violence. There's no excuse for any violence, but some violence has some sort of sense behind it. It's not acceptable. The sense is not good, but the person who's committing the violence is doing it for a reason. For example, someone wants to rob you, you resist, they shoot you. I'm not excusing it. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying in his mind, he had the reason to shoot you. Whereas the violence here is the violence that we find in Genesis 6 before the flood. Before God wiped out all the world, he said that the earth was filled with violence. This is the same violence, which is meaningless violence. Violence for the sake of violence. Bloodshed all over Jerusalem. And it's senseless. If you were living in his day, it would look like something like this. A man walks into a school with an assault rifle and shoots 19 kids. Why? Is there any reason behind that? Does he know the children? It's senseless. It's just bloodthirst. Or, like we had recently in Nigeria, a guy walks into a church and shoots 50. Why? Right? Senseless violence. This is what Habakkuk is complaining about. Meaningless violence. It's got that bad. Okay, so I'm not saying don't complain about robbery kind of violence, but I'm just saying this is what the world looks like, and you look at your world today, it's the same. Verse 3. "Why do you make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong?" Next, he complains about iniquity and wrong. Now, iniquity is more than just sin. It's about the character of the sin. It's talking about the inner character of how the sin is committed. To give you an illustration, there's a verse in the Proverbs I will just read for you, and it's a very good illustration, I think, of what iniquity is. So Proverbs 30:20 says this: "This is the way of the adulteress. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, 'I have done nothing wrong.'" Iniquity is to proceed in a sin without repentance. When Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, I don't know what exactly was happening, but she was asked a question in Parliament and she said, "This lady is not for turning," right? Now that's politics. I'm not saying that was iniquity, but that's the idea, This adulteress is sinning, but she's not for turning. She is set in her way. That's what iniquity is. Do we see iniquity today? Which city in the world today does not have a gay pride celebration? What's that? We're celebrating that we have twisted God's order, and we're saying we won't turn. It's gone farther than that. We're celebrating it now. And we take the rainbow, and that's what we use as a sign. Iniquity. Wrong, he complains about. Or your version might say trouble. And the idea there is the same. This is not just any old trouble. It's not passing trouble. This is trouble that has set in. This is trouble that is established. It's here to stay. It's become the norm, right? In the book of Psalms, it says this. It talks about leaders who create trouble, or there it calls it mischief, but it says they frame it by the law. They use the law to frame trouble. Right? So, for example, it's legal today for a man and a man to get married. That's trouble framed by the law, and it's here to stay. That's the world that Habakkuk is looking at. Next he says, so the next part is almost if you imagine that this wickedness, this iniquity, this wrong is established, he's saying this is what it looks like. Destruction and violence are before me. The idea there is that you got violence and havoc as a societal sin. The society is just full of violence, right? So if you were living in his days, you would have been hearing the sirens. You'd have been hearing sirens every 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes, night and day, sirens. You know, what are they going to do? They're dealing with kids chasing each other in the streets with knives and machetes. Ambulances at night, what are they going to do? They're going to deal with drunken violence. That's what the world looks like for Habakkuk. The next part, he talks about there's strife and contention. Strife and contention arise. That's the next complaint. There's strife and contention in the city. And here, he was talking about the physical violence and destruction. Now he's talking about strife and contention in words. There's strife and contention. People are not getting along. Walking around the street, across one street to another side of the street, people are swearing at each other. More than that, remember, he's talking about Jerusalem. He's talking about God's people. Strife and contention in the church, he's saying. Do we see that today? Do we see strife and contention in the church? Do we argue needlessly? You know? Do we sprinkle in mass and people get into a fight about that? Do we baptize infants or adults only? People get into a fight about that. I'm not saying we shouldn't discuss doctrine, but should we be striving with one another? Should we be contending with one another? God does not like it. Right? The Bible says this in Proverbs 20, verse 3, says, "It is an honor for a man to keep aloof from strife, but every fool will be quarreling." Habakkuk is saying, I look in your city, God, and there's quarreling. People are just quarreling. Verse 4, he says, the law is paralysed. The law, God gave Israel the law of Moses. Why did he give him the law of Moses? To make things clean, to make things beautiful. The law of Moses was not supposed to be a burden. If you follow it, things will be good. If they followed it, there will be other nations will be looking at them saying, we want to be like these guys. Look how much equity there is in their country. Look how there's no hungry people in their country. Look how the needy are looked after. Look how there's justice in their country, right? But Habakkuk says the law is paralysed. He's saying the law in Jerusalem, the law has no authority. It doesn't secure any respect. No one cares about the law. It's not being obeyed. Do we see that today? You talk about the law for 10 minutes to a church, and you know what you hear? You talk about obedience and the law and all of that to a church. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, legalism. Has God changed? Does he give us laws and things to do to make our life bad or good? To make things beautiful, to make us desirable, or to make us ugly? Right? Because that's the next thing he says. And justice never goes forth. He says things are ugly in Jerusalem because the law has been numbed. That's what he's complaining about. And he says, for the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. So even worse than justice not going forth, when justice does go forth, it goes forth contrary to justice. The people who should be jailed are free. That's what he's saying. Right? And so in our day, we see this. We see, there the beauty of the Torah, the beauty of the Moses, the law of Moses, the beauty of the Old Testament, of the Ten Commandments, has been clouded by people's lack of respect for it. And today we see that the beauty of the gospel is clouded. The average unbeliever out there doesn't see the beauty of the gospel. It's not attractive to them. Why? Because of us. We're striving about baptism. You know? Because that's what God cares about. God cares about how you baptize. We're striving. So the beauty of the gospel is clouded. How about our love for violence? You say, I don't like violence. I've never done any violence to anyone. What's the last movie you watched? How many people died in that movie and how did they die in that movie? You know? Does Hollywood make violent movies because there is no market for it? You know? Isn't it a shame when we are the market? And the beauty of the gospel is clouded by our disobedience of the law. We got such a distaste for the law that we call it legalism. So that's his world and our world. And you have to decide how they compare. If you think that we're living in a similar world, I would even argue that our time is worse. I'd say it's worse because we have a greater light. But if you can agree with me that, they're very comparable, then the next question we have to ask ourselves is this: what did he do about it? And then we ask ourselves, is that what we're doing about it? About what we're seeing today? So what did Habakkuk do about it? Back to verse 2. Habakkuk says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help?" He's crying for help. Habakkuk is seeing all these things that we just mentioned, and he's crying for help. He's hearing about kids being shot up in the school, he's crying to God for help. He's seeing pride marches, he's not wagging the finger saying, God will judge these guys. He's crying to God for help. And his cry only intensifies. The next cry, he says, "Oh Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not hear?" And then he says, "I cry to you violence." The next cry is intensifying. His cry is not, he doesn't get to a point where he's like, it's just mumbling a prayer. It's intensifying. He says, "I cry to you violence." You switch on the news, you see it. God, violence. That's the idea here. He's crying to God. Verse 3 is saying, why? Two whys. Why, God? Why? This is his life, crying to God. Question, is that what we do? When we're seeing all these things, is that what we're doing? Is that what we're doing? Are we crying out to God? And especially when we're seeing these things in the church. Right? When we're seeing problems in the church, are we crying out to God? Is that what we're doing, or are we walking around pointing fingers, arguing with each other, saying, "Oh, that church, that's not a true church"? Do you know what they do? They sprinkle. They have no idea who God is. They sprinkle. They baptize children. Habakkuk is crying out. What we do is, I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to call it. And I'm not saying you guys. We do. The Lord has really dealt with me, especially about some of the, like strife. I feel like I will never debate anyone about anything again, I feel like. I don't care what issues you have doctrinally, I'm going to go pray for you. That's what I'm going to do from now on, because I can see how God feels about it. He doesn't like it. And just think about it. Who has ever been won to Jesus by argument? Have you ever argued someone into faith? Nah. You never argue anyone into believing. Never. Argue all you like. You argue with someone. Myself and Mike were speaking the other day and we were talking about men, and he was saying to me, if I'm wrong about something, it's easier. If you want me to hear you, don't correct me. Don't correct me directly. Don't come to me and be like, oh, Mike, you're so wrong about this. Rather than that, just tell me what your view is. And as I'm listening, I will hear where I'm wrong. And I won't even say anything. I will go back and study for myself, and I will be corrected. Gentleness in correcting. You know? Let's be wary of YouTube. YouTube today is leading us astray because there's so many people out there who wanna, how many times do you see this word? So-and-so exposes so-and-so. And these are two Christians. You know? And the reason why they're using those kind of words, exposes so-and-so, is so that you can click and watch it. But what spiritual benefit is it? Instead of spending all that time making a video to make money, he should have been praying for that person. You know? And that's what we should be doing. So, if we have agreed that the word of Habakkuk is the same as ours, and we're now agreeing that we are doing what we shouldn't be doing, we should be praying rather than arguing and fighting. If we're still together, then we get to the point of the whole sermon. This is the sermon. If prayer is the answer, how should we pray? How did Habakkuk pray? Yeah? So, let's look at how Habakkuk prayed. Habakkuk says, "O Lord, how long?" That's the first thing that hits you. How long? The way it's written in the Hebrew would be, "Until when?" I prefer that one. It feels more like, you know, until when? I've been crying for so long about this long. Until when are you not going to do anything about it? Before I actually get into it, let me ask you a question that you don't need to answer out loud. Answer to yourself. What is it that you can think of that you prayed for the longest time? And how long have you been praying about that particular thing? Right? Keep that question in your head, in your mind. Habakkuk says, how long? How long shall I cry for help? And like I said to you, his cry only intensifies. He's crying, how long, Lord? How long? Until when? When will you answer me? When we look at Habakkuk's prayer, I see three things. Persistence. I don't know exactly how the scholars arrive at this figure. I'm not sure. But I've read some commentaries where scholars are saying that this how long is 20 years, that he was praying about this for 20 years. Now, I don't know exactly how they reached that number, but it doesn't matter because just reading verse 2, you can see that he's been praying for a long time. Yeah? So persistence. Habakkuk is persistent in prayer. Number 2, he's honest. He pours out his heart. Habakkuk is not praying with just words. He's praying from the depths of his heart. Listen to these words. Verse 2. I cry out for help and you will not hear me. Just picture the man kneeling and praying and try and get into his heart. I cry out for help and you will not hear me. I cry to you violence and you will not save. Until when, Lord? Until when? How long? He's saying. Verse 3, why do you make me see iniquity? This one, the next one, I even felt a bit like scared of reading it. I thought, I don't want to talk to God like that, but look at the honesty. Why do you idly look at wrong? So God, you can see this happening. You're not doing anything about it. Why? He's saying to God. This is his heart. Honesty before God. He's not trying to impress God with words. God wrote the Bible. You know? We're not going to impress him with quoting it to him. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but the point I'm trying to say is flowery prayers is not what God is looking for. When we come to pray, God is looking for our heart. And he says, why, Lord? Why are you looking idly at wrong? Why are you making me see iniquity? It's almost like he's saying, why was I born this time? Why should this be the century I'm living in. And the last thing I see is that he prays according to God's will. If you look at all those things, there is nothing in all the things that he prays about that God can disagree with Habakkuk on. God cannot turn around and say, Habakkuk says, I cry to you violence. God cannot say, I don't really care about that. Let them go ahead. God cannot say that. Habakkuk is praying God's heart. God does not like violence. Habakkuk is praying God's will. Wickedness. God hates wickedness. Destruction, violence, strife, contention, wrong. God hates all these things. The law being paralysed, he's the one who gave the law. Did he give them the law to not follow it? You see, he's praying God's will, right? And so the same with us. Whatever the situation is, it could be a church situation, right? It could be that, there's doctrinal problems. God does care about doctrine. He's the one that gave us the doctrine, right? But pray. And you should be confident because you know you're praying his will. Instead of beating people up, pray. You're assured that God is going to hear you. Because this is, if you're right and they're wrong, well, God gave this doctrine. God cares about it. Pray. Instead of saying Joel Austin, this guy, pray for these guys. They've got thousands and thousands of people sitting there listening to them. Pray for them. Pray until you can say, how long, Lord? You should have answered by now. How long? Instead of watching YouTube channels and saying, heretic. So it will be interesting. Time is it? We've got some time. Let's turn to Matthew. Matthew chapter 6. So this is the Lord's Prayer. And the Lord says, and when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites. Oh, sorry, I'm reading from verse 5. And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues. Let's just change synagogues for church. For they love to stand and pray in the church and to stand in street corners that they may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. The Lord is saying, if you're praying to be seen by others, you've got your reward. You're praying to be seen, you've been seen, you've got your reward. Right? So that's how not to pray. Right? Verse 6. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. First of all, you're praying to your Father. That's the first thing. Habakkuk's prayer, this 20 years he's praying, do you think he was praying in the street corners? Do you think anyone knew that he was praying these prayers? That when you read it, doesn't it strike you as a very personal, intimate prayer? And when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Habakkuk's prayer is 3 verses long, verse 2 to verse 4. But how much is contained in those 3 verses? He literally has prayed for our whole society today. Violence, iniquity, wrong, destruction, strife, contention, obedience to the law, justice. But look how concise he is. He's not full of words. He's praying from his heart, but he's not there just to spend time. He's got something to say and he's saying it. Pray then like this, verse 9. Our Father in heaven. He starts the prayer with, "Oh Lord," the name of God, Yahweh. Oh Yahweh, he starts the prayer with. That acknowledges the fatherhood of God. He acknowledges his position in heaven. He acknowledges all of that in just that one, in just calling him, oh Lord. So pray like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Habakkuk's prayer is all about that. Hallowed be your name. Why is Habakkuk so bothered about all these things? Because of God's glory. Habakkuk is saying to God, this is your city. This is Jerusalem. You have put your name in Jerusalem. These are your people. And look at what they're doing. Your name is involved in this. He's saying to them, to God. He's praying, God is a God of covenant. And he's in covenant with Israel. That means what Israel does has a reputational effect on God's name. God is in covenant with us as his church. You're his bride. So if you're walking around as a filthy bride, what are you doing to his name? Habakkuk wants God's name to be hallowed. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Your kingdom, God, is not about violence. There should be no violence in Israel. There should be no iniquity in Israel. There should be no trouble in Israel. There should be no destruction in Israel. There should be no strife, no contention. The law should be obeyed. Justice should not be perverted. The wicked should not surround the righteous. He literally prays the first half. The Lord's Prayer is divided into two. The first part is focused on God. The second part on us, right? He prays the first part. And you can summarize the prayer with the last part of the prayer, which is deliver us from evil. He's saying, deliver us from evil. So, what message do I have for us today? Well, the first thing I want to tell us is we have to be persistent in prayer. You have to pray like someone who believes he will get what they're praying for. And not only that they must get what they're praying for. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not trying to act as if we're commanding God to do anything. God remains sovereign. God will never give you anything that he doesn't desire to give you. But God wants you to come boldly into his presence. God wants you to want what you want. One of the things that happens today is we say, if according to your will, right? We pray for something and we say, if it's in your will. But you know how terrible what we do and why that's so terrible? Because we use it how God did not mean it to be used. When God told us to pray according to his will, it's almost, think about it this way, it's almost as a strategy kind of thing, right? He's telling you, if what you're asking for is not in God's will, he will not give it to you. So make sure that it is in God's will. But how do we use it? We use it to give up praying. We say, God, I really want to be healed, for example. But if it's according to your will, then you stop praying. You've given up. And you've used God's name to give up. God is saying, press in. Ask me until I give it to you, or I tell you no. Now think about the prayers that you have given up on. Did you hear no? Or did you decide, he's not answering, that must be a no? Do you see what I'm trying to say? God requires us to be persistent. And you might think this is just Habakkuk. He's a special guy. He can pray for 20 years. The saints of God, the true saints of God, are persistent in prayer. Abraham was 75 years old when God promised him to make him a nation. God said, I will make you a nation, and through your nation, through you, that nation I'm going to make you, the Messiah is going to come. So just think about that for a minute. The purposes of God for the world depend on Abraham having a son. Abraham must have a son. Right? He doesn't have a son from the age of 75 to 100, he's still waiting. His wife's womb is barren, he is too old, and Abraham never stops praying. never stops praying. And he knows that I must have a son. If God's will is going to be done for the world, I must have a son. And yet, he wrestles with God to get his son. He doesn't sit back and say, well, I know I'm going to have one because it must be. And then he sits back and relaxes. No, he wrestles. He acts as if he must go himself to God and take the son and bring him with him. And that's how we should pray. Isaac, the son. The son is born, and Abraham has other sons. And God says, it's not any of these other sons, it's this one, Isaac, the one that you had with Sarah. It's him. He knows that. Yeah? He gets married at the age of 40. At 60, they still haven't got a baby. Again, he must have a son. How does he pray? The Bible says that he prayed hard for God to open his wife Rebecca's womb. And these guys are honest. When you look at Abraham, God comes to Abraham and says, I will bless you. Multiple times. This is before he has a son. And Abraham is like, what are you going to give me, God? I haven't got a son. He's honest. Said, this is what I want. You haven't given it to me. What are you going to give me? But they are persistent. Even in the face of a direct promise that must be accomplished, they're still persistent in prayer. Jacob wrestled with God. Wrestled with God. 2 brothers that are born to Isaac. Right? Now remember, the promise that God gave to Abraham is called Abraham's blessing. Yeah? Through you, I'm going to bless you and make you a nation, and that nation is going to bring to the world the Messiah. That's Abraham's blessing. Yes? From the day before he was born, God said it's going to be Isaac who's going to be this nation. It's going to be through the bloodline of Isaac that the Christ comes. Before he was born, I can imagine his mom telling him this, and it was the mom that prayed. So this was told to the mom, right? So you can just, and the Bible says that he was his mom's favorite. So you can imagine he spent his childhood with his mom, and his mom was telling him this story over and over. It was in here. He believed it. And he wanted it so bad. Again, I'm not encouraging this. This wasn't good. He wanted it so bad, he deceived his own dad and cheated his own brother. But then he goes off, and God teaches him a lesson about deception and lying. And when he's coming back, the next day, he's going to see his brother Esau. They haven't seen each other for a while. He's going to see his brother Esau. That's the night he wrestles with God. What do you think they're wrestling about? They're wrestling about the promise. That's what they're wrestling about. He says they wrestled all night, and Jacob would not let him go. And God touched the hip socket, and he limped from that day on. He prayed so much, it hurt him. Right? And at the end of it, what does God say to him? Let me go. And he says, I will not let you go until you bless me. That's how we're supposed to be praying. You get a hold of God, yeah, in prayer, and you say, I will not let you go until you bless me. Right? And God says to him, what's your name? He says, Jacob. He says, from now on, your name will not be Jacob, your name will be Israel. Do you know the meaning of the word Israel? He strives with God and man, or he strives with God. God liked the fact that he strove with him. Now, are we silly enough to think that he's stronger than God? God came down and wrestled with him as a man, obviously, but as a picture for us. He wants us to see this picture. God is saying to us, I want you in your prayer to wrestle with me. Be so determined to get what you want that you will not let go of me until I've given it to you. Jesus was speaking about John the Baptist, and he said, from the days of John until now, the kingdom of God suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. And the idea there is, John the Baptist came baptizing people for repentance, and crowds followed him. And now Jesus is here, and these crowds are now following Jesus. And they're so determined to hear the truth, to hear the word, to hear him preach, that they are traveling across the countryside to go hear him speak. They're so far away from home that at one point he wants to send them home. The disciples are like, send them home. And he's like, if I send them home, they won't make it. They're hungry and it's far away. He has to provide food miraculously. But the point is, do you see their persistence? That's what Jesus honors. That's what he's saying. The kingdom of God suffers violence. These guys are so eager. They're pressing in. That's what God wants us to do in our prayer, to press in. So let me just turn to Luke. We're almost finished. Turn to Luke. Luke chapter 18. Why do you think we don't press in? I'm looking at all of you guys, and I know you pray. I know you believe in prayer. But why is it that we don't press in? Why is it that we don't pray for something for 20 years? Because we lose heart. God stays quiet for too long, like he stayed quiet with Habakkuk for 20 years, and we lose heart. We give up. It's like a kid going to his dad, Dad, buy me a bike, buy me a bike, buy me a bike, buy me over and over and over and over. Eventually, what does he do? He just stops asking. That's what we do. We just stop asking. Jesus is going to tell us in this parable why we stop asking. And if we understand it, what he's saying is we will see that it's a cause for repentance. Luke 18, from verse 1, he says, and he told them a parable to the effect that they ought always to pray. So at the end of this parable, he's telling us the aim of this parable before we even get to it. He says, number one, that we ought always to pray and not lose heart. We ought to always pray and be persistent about it. We don't give up. So that's the aim of the parable. At the end of this parable, that's what we're supposed to get. So here's the parable. He said to them, in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor respected man. And there was a widow in that city who kept coming to him and saying, give me justice against my adversary. For a while he refused, but afterwards he said to himself, though I neither fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will give her justice so that she will not beat me down by her continue coming. And the Lord said, hear what the unrighteous judge says. And will not God give justice to his elect, who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long over them? I tell you, he will give justice to them speedily. And this last verse, listen to this. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? Based on that parable, he's saying that when he comes back and he finds people are no longer praying, they're no longer persistent in prayer, he will say there is no faith on the earth. We tend to read that verse, will he find faith on the earth? And we think he's talking about outside there. He's talking about inside here. When he comes back, will he find you praying persistently? Will he find you pressing in? Mm-hmm. Or will he find, like the boy, you stopped asking for the bike? Why did the boy stop asking for the bike? He lost trust in his dad. He lost faith in his dad. He said, he's never going to buy me that bike. That's what we do when we stop praying, when we stop persisting in prayer. Why should we pray? Well, just a few more verses. Jesus himself in his life on the earth. I could read you verse after verse after verse, and I know you know them, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to read one that I think summarizes it. Jesus himself spent his life in prayer. All night, Always he's alone. They have to go look for him. This is Jesus. This is the Son of God. Luke 5:16 says, but Jesus himself would often slip away to the wilderness and pray. And now, right now, he's ascended. What's he doing? Romans 8:34 says he's at the right hand of God, making intercession for you and me. He's still praying. And we're not. A lot of the times you will hear people say, oh, we want to be like the first century church. You know, the church in Acts, that was a church. The church should go back to those days. There was miracles. Sin was judged. They were bold. I mean, one message, 3,000 people get saved. That's the church we should go back to. They shared. They were just amazing people. You know what we don't see? How they were like that. What made them like that? Go read the book of Acts. Before anything major happens, prayer. These guys were always praying. Always praying. And we don't pray, and we wonder, why do things look the way they look? Because we don't pray. There's a quote from a guy called Thomas Watson. He says this. You know, in the book of Acts, when Peter was in prison, and the angel came and opened the prison doors and let him loose. You know the story? Thomas Watson says this. The angel fetched Peter from the prison. But it was prayer that fetched the angel. These guys were so persistent. When Peter shows up at the door, the young girl goes and opens the door, and it's like it's Peter, and she runs back in and tells them she left him at the door. Guys, Peter is at the door. They're like, hey, we're praying here. He's not just. They would not stop praying until he showed up. That's how we should be in our prayer life. You know? So I know this is hard. I found it very hard myself because I felt like I have never prayed in my life. I felt so convicted, and you probably feel the same way. But let me just get this across to you. This is not supposed to condemn you. You're not supposed to feel like, oh, what's wrong with me? This is God calling us. The throne room of grace is open. He's saying, come, pray. Come often. Stay long. Don't let go of me until I give you what you want. I like it when you struggle with me. My little daughter, I got a 1-year-old, and she's one of her first phrases that she's learned is hold me. Yeah? So she wants you to just carry her all day. It doesn't matter what you're doing, do it with one hand, right? And she literally comes up to my legs and stands there, and she will, it doesn't matter how, sometimes I decide, you know what, I'm not going to hold you, I'm doing something, let me ignore you and you'll be quiet. She will just sit there and pull my legs, hold me, and she will not give up. She wins every time, you know? And that's us. If we were like that with God, we are going to win every time. Even when we lose, we win. Even when God doesn't give you what you were praying for, he gives you something else. Or he shows you why that wasn't good. Do you know what I mean? You never lose with God. He's your Father. That's what we're supposed to be seeing God. God is your Father. Be glad to go to him. Go often. You know? Pray often. Pray, like you should be happy. You know, I had a thing once. In Islam, apparently, they giving to the needy is supposed to earn you heaven, right? So if you go to a place like Saudi Arabia, beggars feel like they're doing you a favor when they beg money from you, right? Very proud. A beggar is very proud. It's like, you know, I'm trying to get you to heaven. You know what I mean? Here's the thing. With us here, when I ask you, could you pray for me for this? You should love me. I'm giving you an opportunity to enter the throne room of grace. You should love everyone that has a prayer request for you. You should be excited a prayer request. You should be looking for them. You should be driving around. You see people arguing, oh, Lord Jesus, lift them up. You know? You know what I mean? So let me end with another quote. And the idea of this is, I don't want you guys to feel like you were being beaten up. I hope all of you are convicted. I hope all of you feel like your prayer life is lousy. Yeah? That's okay. But don't go out here feeling like God hates me. Okay? This is an encouragement to pray. Listen to what John Calvin says. Prayer is when I climb up to my Father's lap and whisper my needs, my praises, my confessions, thanksgiving into his ears. Let me read that again. Prayer is when I climb up to my Father's lap and whisper my needs, my praises, my confessions, and thanksgiving into his ears. But you must climb up to your Father's lap. Don't be like the delivery drivers. See, the delivery drivers, you got a few, you got two or three different kinds. You got the one that gets to the door, places the package on the floor, rings the bell and walks off. Takes a picture and walks off. You open the door, the guy's gone. Yeah? You didn't see his face, he's off. You got other ones that chuck the package. I live in a flat, right? Others chuck the package. If you live in a flat, sometimes they ring the bell, you open the door, you expect them to come in. You think, oh, he's not coming. You go down, he's not there, he's off. But then every now and again, you get the one that comes up. He rings the bell, comes up. The package is not heavy, right? It's just too big for the letterbox. But he brings it up, waits for you to open the door, says good morning, gives you the package, says, have a nice day. Have a nice day. Do you pray like him or do you pray like the guy who chucks the package from, That's how we pray sometimes. We just throw a bunch of words at God and we're off, You need to be sitting on his lap, get a hold of him, and leave there having actually had an interaction with him. Amen? Let's close in prayer. Father God, we ask you, Father, for forgiveness, Father, because we haven't viewed you rightly, Father. We have viewed you as someone who's not on our side, someone who is scary to approach, someone who's unwilling and has to be forced to do anything for us, when you really are our Father. You want us to come to you and spend time with you. You want us to come to you and annoy you, Father. You want us to bother you, Father. You want us to be persistent with you. And that, in doing that, we build up a relationship with you. Father, please have mercy on us and help us to be like this. Help us to be persistent and to be prayerful people, Father God. Help us, Father. We have this flesh and we have the habits that we have developed over time that make prayer a task for us. Please, Father, take that away from us. Help us as a church to be a prayerful church, Father. Together, Father, help us to be a prayerful church. Help us individually to love to pray for one another, to look at needs in the world as opportunities to talk to you. Have mercy on us, O God. In Jesus' name.